Hello, world. Ready to take a stand for causes you believe in? Warmest welcome to World Humanitarian Drive's 25th episode of Inspiring Millions Show. This is the show where we celebrate brilliant minds from around the world who share with us their story, one story at a time. Today, our featured guest is Honorable Kasthuri Patto, a Minister of Parliament in Malaysia. We'll get to know her inspiring story in a short while. Thank you for joining us, live or on replay. I'm Vivandrada O'Flynn, your host and Global Media Relations of World Humanitarian Drive. World Humanitarian Drive, also known as WHD, is an international NGO founded in Croydon, UK by British Indian global peace activist, entrepreneur, writer Dr. Abdul Basit Saeed. The primary vision of WHD is to promote peace, education, and trade harmony initiatives globally among everyone across the world, regardless of race, gender, religion, or nationality, living as one family. WHD is striving for humanity. This Inspiring Millions show is your show. As always, we encourage you to engage and interact with us. Please help us spread inspiration to the world by sharing this link. Put your questions that you would like to ask our guest, Honorable Kasthuri Patto, greetings or comments that you have for us in the chat box. We will read them later on in the show. Let us also know wherever you are watching this. Wherever you are in the world, let us keep you company and brighten your day as we share peace, love, and goodwill. Let us take a look back at this year's theme from UN Women for International Women's Day celebration, which is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. For women to have an equal future and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, women have to be at the forefront where decisions are being made. Women's achievements and leadership benefit everyone in all sectors of life. Yet there are still parts of the world that underutilize the talents and capabilities of women, and in some cases do not give them credit where it is due. Here to inspire and empower us all today is Honorable Kasthuri Patto, a Malaysian politician from the Democratic Action Party, a component party of the Pakatan Harapan coalition. She is the incumbent member of parliament for Batu Kawan in Penang since 2013. She believes that politics is in her DNA. According to her Twitter account, Patto Katsuri, she is P. Patto's girl, microbiologist, will work for chocolate, which is awesome as it is peanut butter and chocolate day today. Let's all welcome a woman who speaks out for the voiceless, marginalized, minorities, who believes in the right to life, human dignity, and freedom. Honorable Kasthuri Patto. Salamat datang.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful opening.
Welcome, Honorable Kasthuri Patto. Terima kasih. Thank you for joining us.
Sama-sama. Terima kasih.
Thank you. So how are you today?
Oh, very well. Just last minute preparations before we head on to Kuala Lumpur for the Parliament meeting on Monday.
So, Honorable Kasthuri Patto, could you please introduce yourself to the world and let us know more about your journey that led you to be the MP that you are today?
Thanks, Viva. My name is Kasthuri Patto, and I am the Member of Parliament representing the constituency of Batu Kawan in Penang. This is my second term as an MP. I come from a family of my sister and I alone, but I must say that I'm slightly more, I have an advantage because both my parents were involved in politics. My father was a former state assembly person. My mother was the first secretary for the women's wing of my party. My father also served as a member of parliament. So needless to say, not just politics, but trouble actually runs in our blood. I grew up in my hometown of Ipoh and studied in University Malaya and majored in microbiology. So in 2013, when my party offered me and encouraged me to take on the challenge of contesting in Parliament Batu Kawan, I said, yes, why not? And that's where my journey began, not just representing my community, my constituency in Parliament, but to be exposed to other issues, other situations, and international law, international issues that you don't normally see or hear happen domestically. Um, yeah, so this is basically a little bit about me. I sit as the executive council member in the Parliamentarians for Global Action. I'm in the steering group for the International Panel of Parliamentarians for the Freedom of Religion and Belief. I'm a member in the Women in Parliament movement and a member in the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. In my party, I'm the International Secretary for the Women's Wing of the Democratic Action Party.
So, Honorable Patu, politics is in your DNA. So, what is your favorite thing about politics? What do you enjoy most about participating in politics?
I think the one thing that stands out is your interaction with the people. Many parliamentarians or politicians forget that they are in that position today only because of the power and the mandate given by the people. As Abraham Lincoln said in 1860 in his speech in Gettysburg, it is a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I think that is the best part of my job. Of course, on the other hand, it would be my drive to ensure that no one is left behind, that justice and social justice is accorded for everyone. Poverty eradication, rights for all, including minority groups, women, children. My campaign for the right to life. So this journey in Malaysian politics has opened not just my mind but my heart to many of the issues that that does not necessarily happen in our own backyard, but an injustice somewhere is an injustice everywhere. And that's what I tell myself, that just because it doesn't happen in your own backyard doesn't mean that you turn a blind eye towards it. In this age and time of globalization and how we are all connected at the touch of a button on our smartphones, it is impossible to turn away against violence, against abuses of power, against corruption, against tyranny, against dictatorship, against social injustice, against poverty, and against a good government. That's what everybody wants at the end of the day.
No one is left behind is a great policy to have. So, how has the pandemic affected your activities as an MP for Batu Kawan in Penang?
Okay. So I believe many MPs would concur with me when I say that this would have been the busiest period of our careers being in politics. Apart from the emergency ordinance that had been introduced by the government in January this year, it meant that Parliament did not convene in the first quarter of the year, but through a lot of lobbying, a lot of campaigning, the government has allowed Parliament to convene for a meeting on Monday. And that's something that I look forward to. So apart from your role as a parliamentarian and your duty to be a part of the check and balance in Parliament, a part of the question and answer in Parliament, to suggest good policies, good practices, to offer constructive criticism and ways of improvement to the government. It is busiest for us because of the aid we have to hand out to people on a daily basis. With the whole country in lockdown, different various stages of lockdown, and in various states in the country as well, we find that many people have lost their source of income. They have no salaries, they have no food to eat. And that is where MPs and state assembly persons, civil society, NGOs and NGIs, and just your lay men and women on the streets stepping up, chipping in to ensure that all mouths are fed. So we're actually quite busy with that at the moment. But then again, that also exposes that how fragile our system is. That we see now the issues and problems that we face, particularly in a pandemic, how unprepared we were. And I think this is truly an eye opener, just not just for Malaysia, and I trust many countries in the world, that if we are faced with not just a pandemic but with another crisis of this magnitude, then we would be more prepared to face it, to ensure that while we are all racing against time, fighting, let's say, a pandemic, to ensure that we also that the economy is also sustainable. It is also to make sure that little issues to some people, which are big issues to others, like human rights, don't fall through the cracks. That violence against women and children are not something that takes a back seat, that mental health awareness doesn't take a back seat, that your rights as a worker in your workplace, to ensure that that violence doesn't increase only because of a lack of um, opportunity to earn an income. So these are the things that I'm quite bothered about, and I'm quite concerned whether they would be issues that would take a back seat, when you speak about the pandemic and you speak about the economy. Yeah.
So, Honorable Patu, you've mentioned a lot there, and we could really gain from that. You're a woman, so what can a woman's leadership do to impact change in communities, countries, and the world?
Thank you. I think that's such a good question. And it is a question that everybody has to ask at every stage of governance and leadership. And to ensure that you have a minimum 30% women in decision making, whether it is at a city council level, whether it's at a state assembly, whether it's at a lower house or the Dewan Rakyat, as we call it in Malaysia, or the Senate or the upper house in Malaysia as well. So the significance would be that issues that normally are regarded as soft issues, which are actually very, very important issues, would be given a place at the table. Normally, you find that perhaps 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, the subject of mental health awareness, mental health, was such a taboo subject that nobody wanted to talk about it, nobody wanted to address it. But now, in this pandemic, with this lockdown, you find that more people are stepping forward to say that I'm a survivor of this and I've gone through this, and depression it's real, and don't be shy if you're facing it. And so the conversation on something that used to be a soft subject, used to be a taboo subject, has become more mainstream today. You find many international bodies making statements, pleading to governments to invest in time and resources to ensure that again, no one is left behind, and to ensure the mental health of people are preserved and protected. And governments allocate enough reserve. Governments allocate enough money allocations to make sure that that the subject of mental health is not something that can be just cancelled and the money channeled elsewhere. I think that to develop a society, to develop a community, to develop a nation, it is no longer a question of if we need women at the table, if we need women as engineers to develop and rebuild countries, if we need women at the peace room or the war room. We've come to a point today that women must be part of this pattern. Women have to be part of this structure. Women have to have a place at the table. Their voices must be heard. And when a woman's voice is heard, children's voices are heard, youth's voices are heard, the elderly, the senior citizens' voices are heard, the disabled communities' voices are heard, women in rural areas, their voices are heard, the minority groups, transgenders, LGBTs, their voices are heard, and everyone else whose voices have not been heard in the past are often heard through the voice of women. And we see this in the structure of governments. When you look at the responsibility that is held or helmed by women ministries, it often targets social development, it often targets community development, it often targets family development. And when you talk about that, that is the essence of what a nation is built on, which is a good, strong, healthy family structure. So it is no longer a time again if you want to have women there, but it is you must have women, and now to achieve minimum 30% quota of women at any decision making process.
So we need women to be where decisions are made. We need women's voices to be heard.
Absolutely.
So what can you say about labels, gender and racial stereotypes and prejudice?
Oh, it will we I don't think we would ever come to a point in society where women or men would be labeled according to their gender or preference or their physicality or how they look, etc. However, what's important is the investment into the campaign to create an awareness on body shaming, to create an awareness of decorum, of the language that you use, and how you judge people. And it starts with the generation that is to come. I just like to share that a year ago, in the Malaysian Parliament, I was actually called dark by a fellow parliamentarian. The speaker couldn't see me, so he said, "Oh, she's dark," and asked me to use face powder, and that would solve the problem. And I was so insulted by that because it felt like an insult, not just to me, but it felt like he insulted women in general. And I was so angry that other women, especially ministers from the other side, the government, did not stand up and reprimand him on the spot. He did not apologize to me. And it actually made national news with so many women coming forward and saying they had also been in that position. They had also been subject to ridicule because of their skin color. They have also, and they worry if their daughters are going to be facing it. And this was an eye opener, not just for the parliament, but it was an eye opener for the country and also the world. How parliamentarians lack decorum. And if a parliamentarian speaks this way in parliament, what sort of example are we going to set for young people who are watching parliamentary sitting to say, I aspire to be an MP one day, I aspire to be an elected representative one day? If such an act is allowed to happen and no serious repercussion or action taken upon the said MP, I proposed an amendment to the standing orders in Parliament, which means that currently, if an MP is potty mouthed, or if an MP utters unparliamentary words, whether it is vulgar, whether it is sexist, whether it's of lacks decorum, the MP could just apologize and retract the statement, and it's business as usual. But what I was proposing was that there's no more apology and retraction, that the Member of Parliament is immediately referred to the Rights and Privileges Committee, which is like a little tribunal by MPs from both sides of the divide, for them and for the said MP to present his or her case, to defend his or her case. And it's quite embarrassing if an MP is summoned by the Rights and Privileges Committee. It's like a child or a student being summoned to the disciplinary teacher's room. It's different. It's a different thing if the teacher comes in and scolds the student for making noise or throwing rubbish. But it's a different thing if someone says, "Hey, the disciplinary teacher wants to see you in his or her room." Then it's like everyone's like, ooh, so it's a different ball game. And I proposed that to the speaker. I said the only way we can put an end to this sort of behavior is to make sure that we have it in on paper, through the amendment of the standing orders. And also I proposed a fine, a minimum fine of 500 ringgit, which is the allowance MPs make when we attend parliamentary sittings, so that the said MP who had uttered sexist remarks, vulgar remarks, racial or racist remarks, will be reprimanded and fined as well. That will go down in history, and that will be it will be a lesson for all others as well. Yeah. But it hasn't happened yet. I wish to follow up on it when I go back to Parliament next week.
You're making changes happen as a woman leader. So, what important traits should today's leaders have? What makes a good politician? And yeah, what are the kind of leaders does the world deserve right now?
Thanks, Viva. I think perhaps there are two types of leaders who perceive or look at themselves as leaders. leaders who do what the people want them to do, or the leaders who educate their people or their community or their constituents along the way being in that position. I like to think of myself as the second type of leader. Yes, I do listen to my constituents. I do put my ear to the ground. I get feedback from them, their anger, their frustrations, and I totally respect that. But also, sometimes it is also important as a leader in the position that I am to share good practices, best practices, according to international standards, human rights declarations, to educate people. Let's not forget that in 1918, um, it was the year that women were finally allowed to vote in the United Kingdom. And prior to that, it was assumed that the male of a household, who is the leader and the head of the house, his vote would represent everyone else's vote in the house. And we've come such a long way that today, if a woman is denied her right to vote, it's almost unthinkable. It's almost equivalent to a crime if you stop a person from exercising their right to at the ballot box during an election. I cannot imagine that, but it did happen a long time ago. So you need to have that drive to educate your constituents, to educate your people, and to tell them how practices in the past were wrong. Domestic violence, it was okay 100 years ago to punch your spouse, to kick your spouse, and mostly these spouses were women. But 100 years down the line, it's a crime to kick your spouse. It's a crime to punch your spouse, to threaten your spouse, to intimidate your spouse, to psychologically harass them. It's a crime, not just in Malaysia, but in many countries as well. So you need to educate your constituents on best practices, what's good, and moral values as well, which we always tend to leave in school. When we leave school, you learn about moral values in school, and then you study hard so that you can score an A for the paper, and then when you leave school, you just leave everything behind in school and then forget about that. So I think it is important to go back to basics, and reach out to your constituents, listen to them. You have to be honest, you have to be hardworking, you have to be responsible. And when you belong to a party like mine, the Democratic Action Party, which is a party that is a very disciplined party. It's a party that holds on to the tenets of righteousness, of good governance, of integrity, of transparency, of principles. Then you have very big shoes to fill, and you live up to that expectation. And I think that if you think that politics is a field where you want to be rich and you want to make money, then please don't join politics, because it is empowering lives, it is bringing about policy changes, it is bringing changes to the lives of the men and women, and the minority groups, children. It is bringing changes to your environment, it is bringing changes to your livelihood around you, and it's not a business or an industry that makes money. Those who have made money being in politics very likely would have made it not following the righteous path. I would say that for sure. And if you think, I know many young people who have access to news now at your fingertips, who read about what's happening in the world, reading about what tyranny and oppression and dictatorships, looking at leaders who abuse their positions and their power, leaders who are corrupt and are still, they still walk scot-free from it. Um, you know, these are the things that young people should look at and say, that's not what I would aspire to be. And I think having this sort of information at your fingertips should give you a better understanding of how things are out there and why it is so important that we have good people in politics. And if you think politics is dirty, then you're the people that we need, because we need you to join in to clean up politics from being taken over, from being managed and being controlled by dirty politicians. So this is a shout out to young people, women and young men who who imagine themselves one day being an elected rep. I think if you already have that thought in your mind, it means that you have the heart to serve. And if you have the heart to serve, it does come with sacrifices, it does come with liabilities, it does come with a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges. But if you're passionate about what you want to do, then that would get you through. You would be able to move through it with the support of family, friends, etc., and your community as well. So yeah.
Wow, you covered a lot of good traits for leaders to have. So listen to constituents, educate constituents, honest, hardworking, responsible, good values, those who bring good changes, set a good example. There's just a lot of information in there. And then, so I think we're also having comments from our virtual audience as well. So to our virtual audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Honorable Katsuri Patu, please send them now and keep the questions coming. I think we also have a birthday celebrant, AEIOU Villanueva. And we have a question from Tanguy Gra. His question is, in France and Europe, lockdown made domestic violence worse and difficult to control, as much as there was a secret word code that victims of those could ask in pharmacy or drugstore in order to secretly ask for help. How has COVID and lockdown impacted in Malaysia?
Okay, thanks. What was his name again?
Tanguy Gra?
Kongigra, thank you for that question. I think it's important to address this now on this platform because, again, we often hear an issue like domestic violence often being a subject that is only niche amongst women, amongst women MPs, lawmakers, or NGOs. So it is great that this subject has come up here on this platform. So, like the trend, the disturbing sad trend globally in Malaysia as well. Sexual violence against children and domestic violence cases have spiked over the 1 year plus. And even though hotlines have been established for survivors of domestic violence to contact and to call up to say they need help and to reach out to authorities, there are also some, I believe, loopholes in the system of how certain cases are handled. In Malaysia, generally speaking, the number of cases that actually make it to court with the perpetrator actually charged and convicted is relatively very low compared to the number of cases that are made, number of reports that are made of domestic violence. Now, these sort of numbers often influence the way victims think because they have distrust in the system, because they have they don't feel comfortable or they fear coming out to make a report, and therefore they choose to suffer in silence. And the problem is often with domestic violence is that the victims are exposed within the vicinity of the perpetrator 24 hours a day if the perpetrator is somebody who is a family member, and that just spells disaster for the victim. um, uh, I think that what is important is that there's a greater awareness for women to come forward and make the report. I believe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because of stigmatization by society, coming forward and making a report against your spouse, whether it is your husband or your wife, who is abusive in the relationship, is something that is of your face value. Your family members would say, can't you keep your domestic problems within the four walls of your house? What would others say? What would the neighbors think? What would your work colleagues think? What would your surrounding neighborhood, if you live in apartments, if you live in a village, in kampongs, in estates, what would the people around you think? What would the children of friends of your children in school think? So it is all these questions of what everyone else is going to think that hinders the victim from making a report. But today we find that while it is very disturbing, very painful to look at the numbers that are quite steep and climbing, I'm also somewhat assured that women are coming forward. Neighbors are taking responsibility. People around them are saying, I'll make a report for you. And this shows that society is wants to be a part of the support system for victims of domestic violence. I think a lot more needs to be invested in technology now that we are on lockdown, and all of us have access to our internet, all of us have access to social media, all of us, well, most of us have access to social media and online portals. I think to reach out for help online would be something that we need to look at to protect the identity of the victims for a start, and to ensure that no one case of a domestic violence is taken lightly and trivialized. I think this is also something that discourages many men or women to come forward and say, I've been a victim of abuse by my partner. It is when the authorities trivialize the issue. In Malaysia, a lot of our men in blue and women in blue are serving at roadblocks in this lockdown. So there's a lack of manpower even to look into detailed cases of domestic violence or sexual violence against children, which are on the rise. And I don't blame them if they're stretched. I sympathize with them. At the end of the day, it boils down to management. It boils down to how the government prioritizes an important subject like domestic violence to ensure that it is something that is important enough to be spoken about at the cabinet meeting in Malaysia. So to all domestic violence survivors out there, know that you are not alone. Seek help because help is out there. There are, particularly in Malaysia, there are NGOs and NGIs who are there who will be able to guide you through the process of what you need to do from point A to point B, to giving your statement, going for medical checkup, etc. So remember, you're not alone. Reach out for help because help is out there.
With more awareness, support system, technology, it's also somewhat easier for people to ask for help. I'm just going to read a comment from Padmanathan Raman Nayar. He's saying, well said, please continue your good work and services rendered to the community, not only in your constituency, but also others. Words of wisdom, indeed. Bravo, Honorable Kasthuri Patto. And then there's another question from Shanta Nagyandram. What would you consider your greatest achievement as a woman parliamentarian?
I think that's a really important question and interesting question to address. And now I must sidetrack a little bit and share that in the state of Penang, where I am in now, we have a agency under the state government called the Penang Women Development Corporation. And last year, for the first time in the history of the country, for the first time in the history of Penang, we organized a mock state assembly sitting only for women. And this is a platform for women to step up and showcase their leadership talent and skill. Many women who previously had been, shy or did not know where they fit in, those who had seen themselves as leaders but never given the opportunity to serve, we created and we provided that platform for them. So we emulated the structure of the state assembly sitting in Penang, which is 40 elected representatives. And it was fantastic that the Speaker of the House also got on board and said, okay, I'll chair your mock state assembly sitting. And honestly, it was really such a proud moment. It's like when your child performs at a concert, I felt like that when I saw all these women, 40 women who come from all walks of life, different backgrounds, as young as 18, as old as in their 60s. Some of them were business women, ex-teachers, they were grandmothers, they were mothers, they were single parents, some were professionals, some had their own little work from home sort of businesses. Many of them were entrepreneurs. Many of them also served in service centers or offices of members of parliament and state assembly persons. And it was indeed a proud moment because it was something that we did. I was the chairperson for the organizing committee for the Women's Assembly. And this year, my colleague, Honorable Lim Siew Kim, has taken over the reins, and she's the new chairperson for the organizing committee. And this has caused a snowball effect in the country. We find other state assemblies reaching out to us to ask us, how did you do this state assembly, mock state assembly sitting for women? Because we'd like to do that. Now, what did we gain from doing this was that we managed to gauge the understanding of women of what politics is, domestic politics at the city council level, state politics, national politics. We managed to identify women who had abilities to be frontliners, to be potential candidates for elections or not. And we also identified the support system of a candidate. For example, women who are great at research, women who are great at doing paperwork, women who are great at organizing, but they don't really want to be in the forefront. So we've identified all these skills that perhaps may have been overlooked by people over years, and they've had this desire to serve, and they had this desire to be a part of the movement of change, to be a part of the movement to bring this sort of a reform in society, and to be involved directly in politics. So I think these are some of the things that I have done. Apart from that, currently I'm a mentor with this Youth Parliament of Malaysia, and I'm honored to be able to speak and address and answer questions by young people who aspire to be lawmakers one day, or who are finding their footing if they really want to do this, or they just want to be someone behind the scenes, etc. So I believe that me as a person being a lawmaker in Malaysia, many young women have come up to me, many young men have come up to me and said that I want to be a lawmaker as well. I also want to be able to champion these issues. And these are things that you don't do for your personal glory. You don't do it, hoping one day that you have carved a name for yourself. When you have done something like this for society, you don't need to tell people that you have done it, because they would remind you that you have done this for them and you have done that for them. So at the end of the day, it is to inspire people, to give hope, particularly to women, to say that if I can do it, somebody like me. There are so many more qualified women out there, so many more intelligent women out there, courageous women out there, women who come from a different background than I, who I know would make great, awesome lawmakers in the Malaysian Parliament and state assemblies. So I believe that would be something that I would be very proud of if I have to speak about women empowerment. Apart from that, it is to keep issues that are often seen as not very important issues, sex education in schools, child marriages in Malaysia, death in custody, which are some of the issues that I speak about, civil liberties, the right to healthcare, the right to education, citizenship issues for children, and people who have been in Malaysia for decades and still have not been accorded or awarded citizenship, and of course the campaign against the death penalty, which is the right to life. I think these are all work in progress. I know that I will not be a lawmaker forever. I look forward to handing over this campaign of mine to budding lawmakers out there, so they would be able to take over and change this world for the better.
When you give women opportunities, they shine, they deliver more than expected. We
Yeah.
have a comment from Shanta Nagendram. Congratulations, Honorable Katsuri. Very impressive personality, values, and outstanding leadership traits. We want people like you back in the ruling government. What can Malaysians look forward to during this difficult time?
Um, I think at the moment it is just to give each other hope. I know in Malaysia things are looking very bleak, but what's important is that we restore hope in our hearts, and we give hope to others by the little gestures of kindness that we offer them. Um, it's really quite hard to say what is going to happen in Parliament next week, but I look forward to a good, productive sitting. And I hope that MPs will be given a platform to speak about the issues that are faced by the people over the past 6 months plus, and over a period of 5 days. It's going to be a challenge, but I hope we'll be able to highlight these issues, and given the due diligence, the due importance for the government to address these issues. Every country goes through dark days and dark times, and it's like a pendulum. Sometimes they say when you swing from one side to another and you swing back. So um, difficult times are not here permanently. They are only here temporarily. But as Malaysians, if we band together with our Bangsa Malaysia spirit, I'm confident that we'll be able to set things right and bring Malaysia back on her course towards being a more sustainable, more just, and more equal nation.
That's great. We have another comment from Professor Dato Dr. GP Govindsamy. He's saying, Honorable Patu, you are a strong advocate of human rights, women empowerment, and gender equality in Malaysia and internationally. As you were the sitting member of parliament for more than 8 years, you did carry the legacy of your late father, Mr. Patu. What are your most memorable challenges and struggles in your career as member of parliament?
I think thank you so much for the question and that special mention of my late father. He inspired me a lot in the work that I'm doing today. I looked at him. I grew up looking at him and his code of conduct, and how his desire in his heart was just to serve the people, and as my mother as well. Um, I have so many pleasant memories, painful memories, which will all be lessons for me to learn and to use not just in my political life, but in my personal life as well. I think one of the more painful memories I've had was when it was in 2015, if I remember, and it was a case of a murder by two brothers, and in Malaysia, normally executions happen on a Friday, but this time we heard that the execution might be earlier. So there was a candlelight vigil that we were part of outside the Kajang prison at night, and there was a light drizzle, and I was standing there with my fellow colleagues and members of the Bar Council and NGOs. And I looked at all the cars that were lined up by the roadside near the prison. And then I looked at the family members of both the boys, the men who were on death row. And it hit me quite hard because the cars that I saw that were parked by the roadside were not Mercedes-Benz or Pajeros or BMWs or Volvos or expensive cars. They were Malaysian-made cars. Some of the cars looked pretty beat up. And the family members were just there in their simple attire. The mother was a rubber tapper. She was with her blouse and just her sarong with a towel on her shoulder. And it dawned to me that you would never see men and women in expensive suits and men and women of power and position standing by the roadside asking the government not to execute their children. Now, I would like to also make myself very clear here. Crime doesn't pay. If you have committed a crime, you must be punished for it. I just don't believe that the death penalty is a punishment for crimes that have been committed. And to me, I felt that it was a law that was used against the minorities a lot. It was a law that was used against people who had no proper representation. It was used against, in Malaysia, commonly known as the B40 group, who are much lower in the socio-economic rung. Very rare you hear or you see people who have very strong cables, very high connections, people who have titles to their names, ever being sentenced to death. When you have good lawyers and you can pay for it, and when you say no system is perfect, then you find that it is this kind of people who are on death row. Today in Malaysia, more than 86% of people on death row are those who come from the B40 category. That was an eye-opening incident for me. Apart from that, it was my day-to-day challenges in my constituency. In 2017, we had a terrible flood, flash floods in my constituency with waters up to chest level. And it was just heartbreaking to see how families were coping with the flood and the aftermath of it. It was just a disaster. It was like a war zone. And I was like, how are they going to recover from this? How are they going to build their lives from it? It was a humbling moment for me, to remind myself never to take things for granted. And it was a moment of realization of my role there as an elected rep, and to do as much as I could within my capacity to help them to rebuild and recover from the flood. Apart from that, it is my engagement with my colleagues internationally, globally, what happens in other countries. And I'm amazed by some of the best practices that are used by systems in other countries. And it's this sort of engagement that gives me the platform to do a comparison between the systems that are existing in Malaysia and better systems that are out there, and why we need to head in that direction. So I would say these are some of my memorable moments. Of course, some of the other moments was that I shaved my head completely in 2013 during the campaign. And it was a sign of protest against corruption and money politics during the campaign. So it was like a wave, a Mexican wave that went throughout the country, starting from Penang and ending up in Sabah and Sarawak. And many people joined in and shaved their heads in protest as well. So that would be something that I would hold on to dearly, my feelings and emotions when I was shaving my head. And yeah, it doesn't help if you have a cousin brother next to you when your head is half shaved and he said, "Oh, you can change your mind now, you know." And I'm like, yeah, my head is half shaved, so you just go through with it. But yeah, I think every day, every session in Parliament was an eye opener for me. It was a learning curve for me. I had good days, I had bad days. I have very memorable, happy memories. I have very sad memories. The death of what was known as the Tiger of Jelutong, the late Mr. Karpal Singh. I used to sit next to him in Parliament, and his demise affected not just me but I'm sure my party colleagues greatly as well. So these are some of these are some of the things I would definitely carry with me throughout my life, in my personal life as well.
I'm also reading the comment from Win right now. Honorable Patu is an admirable woman lawmaker. Malaysia must be so proud of you.
Thank you. I hope.
You are. So why is it important to speak out and stand up for what you believe in?
I think the question should be more of what happens when you don't. What happens when you know there's corruption? What happens when you know that there's abuse of power? When you know that there's tyranny, there's dictatorship? When you know something is wrong in front of your eyes and you don't speak up against it, what happens then? Number one, you are a part of it. You're an accomplice to that act. When you don't stand up and you don't voice out against it. And it's important when women voice out, because the perspective of it would always be something different, would be more refreshing, and the angle of it would always be something perhaps others had not thought of before. I think that is one of the reasons why you want to be in politics, because you need to bring that needed change to the system. If the system is broken, you need to fix it. If the system has never been challenged for a long time, then you need to challenge that system, and you need to bring about the changes to that system, because systems that have been in place for long and have never been challenged are outdated systems and will not serve well for the people in that nation, in your community. So as a lawmaker, as the name rightfully suggests, a lawmaker, your job is there as check and balance, and you have to be courageous to call out what you think is not right, no matter what the cost is. And that is important. Why your voice must be heard? Why the voice of young people must be heard in Parliament? why the voice of women must be heard in parliament, why the voices of minorities must be heard, and people with disabilities must be heard in parliament as well, because that's where laws are made that affects everybody, you and I. We're subject to what comes out of the parliament, out of the doors of the August House. And if you're silent about it, you allow that sort of um, uh, a government that is not there to serve the people, but its own self, and its own agenda and its own survival. And that sometimes takes a very, very long time to recover from. So you have to strike while the iron is hot, speak when you have to, speak when you must, and let what is important is to allow your conscience to guide you. And if you feel that you are right, and according to your conscience and your moral values that you are right, then you must stand up and you must speak up for it.
So if you're silent, if you don't voice out, you're actually just part of it. You're letting it happen.
Yep.
What do you consider your most important values that define you as a person?
I think it's to be humble. It's to have your ears, to have your feet planted on the ground, to have your head on your shoulders, to be hardworking, to be responsible, to be kind. I sometimes find that over time, lawmakers or politicians become a bit jaded. They become a little bit frustrated. They become a little bit burnt out. And again, those are periods, I think, that happens in every politician's life. But what's important is to bounce back, to ensure that you remind yourself why you are where you are, that you are the voice of the people, that you have a duty to ensure that you bring these voices, these issues, these problems, suggestions to the authorities, to the executive, to parliament, to the government. And I sometimes it's a bit disappointing to see how power and privilege and name and money gets to the heads of some politicians, that they think that they're above the law, that they think that they're untouchable. I think no nation needs politicians like that. It is the people who put the politicians there, and it is people who can take the politicians out of that place too. And I'm always reminded of that, and I remind myself of that, to be honest, to be sincere, to be hardworking, to be responsible, to carry out my duty with integrity, to carry out my duty uh, selflessly, to carry out my duty, which it would be a reflection of me, my upbringing, my family, my party. I think these are the things that I adhere to, and I walk in the light of my faith that guides me and governs me. It's my check and balance system, for me to carry on my day-to-day life in politics. So these are the things I hold on to.
You've mentioned a lot of important values there that you have. So you've also talked about burnout that people go through. So it's International Self-Care Day tomorrow. How do you look after yourself and your well-being?
Oh, that's hard. You sometimes you have to sit down for a moment and check in with yourself, and give yourself a little breather. And if you're faced with a, a, a lousy day, a bad day, a challenging day, tell yourself that it is just today. Tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow will be better, and I'm going to make it better. I think what I do sometimes to unwind is to pray. I find a lot of comfort and peace in prayer. I listen to music. I do some non-political reading, or watching videos on YouTube. I allocate a little bit of time so that I'm off this political world for a while, and that sort of gives me a little bit of a boost, and it changes the ecosystem in your mind, it changes the ecosystem in your house, it changes the ecosystem in your office. Yeah, what's important is also to talk to people. I think a lot of people get burnt out also because they keep everything bottled up inside, and this is doesn't just apply to lawmakers or politicians, but many parents who are struggling to make ends meet, they bottle up their emotions and their struggles. Many people in the frontliners are keeping everything inside, and as you can see, in Malaysia, frontliners in the medical field are burnt out, but they keep going on and they keep fighting this, and they keep saying, no, we're going to get through this, and I'm not going to give up. But this last year and this year, we did see many cases of burnout among frontliners. My heart goes out to them, which is why I mentioned just now that there has to be greater planning to ensure the mental health well-being of frontliners, particularly not just those directly in the medical sphere, but all the other agencies related to that, the enforcement agencies, the teaching profession, etc. So I think that's really important. The investment in mental health care, particularly at a time like this virus is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be here. So we just have to learn to live around it and manage it and control it to the best that we can. And meanwhile, while we discover more about this virus and learn more about it, its personality, we do what we can within our control, which is to ensure that we have better mental health care facilities and support, particularly for frontliners out there.
Yeah, so self-care is very important. So aside from being a politician, you're also a microbiologist. So
Yeah.
what can we do to better protect ourselves from viruses such as COVID-19?
I think first and foremost is to believe the science behind this pandemic, and don't fall prey to fake news and hearsay and grandfather and grandmother stories, which I think is sometimes a bigger challenge to deal with than the pandemic itself. It's to empower yourself with knowledge and information according to science of what this virus or the variants of the virus are, and to comply with the strictly to comply with the SOPs and all the guidelines in place. The masks, using masks when you go out, double masks if you must now, to keep your hands clean, to ensure you have physical distancing, to be a bit sensitive towards how you feel. If you have a fever, if you have a cold, if you have sore throat, if you have lost senses of your smell and taste, I think that's something you need to look into before it's too late. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is um, WhatsApp groups are the best source of information now, whether it's your family group or your sports group or your working colleagues group, or whatever, your cooking class or martial arts. And that's the best place to share information and valid, right, true information about this pandemic, and to keep yourself up to date with the latest information about it. um, but all in all, to remember that you're again not alone, that we are all in this together. I sympathize with many who are paranoid about this, and I dread to think about their mental state of health when they lock themselves up in the house and just refuse to go out because of fear of the virus. I really don't know how to comfort them, because it is out there, it is near us, and we just have to ensure that we don't lack on adhering to strict SOPs as stated by countries. Um, I think the virus is real, COVID is real, um, as opposed to conspiracy theories that it is something that is not there, and it is a propaganda, and etc. I think there's a place and time to come up with conspiracy theories. This, however, isn't. It's real, and I hope one day we'll be able to visit each other in person, and that we don't have to have these sort of meetings on Zoom. Although it is a good thing that we have this technology today, but it's nothing like the human touch. It's nothing like being there in person and talking to people face to face rather than staring at a computer screen. So yes, it is a virus that is aggressive. Yes, it is mutating, perhaps even as we speak. We just have to be vigilant and get vaccinated in order to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities.
That's a great message coming from a microbiologist as well. So I'm just going to read more comments from Professor Dato Dr. GP Dorisami. He's saying, we are so pleased with your professional presentation. On behalf of WHD Malaysia chapter, we thank you so much, Honorable Patu. And then Kumarathivan Josephine is saying, we're proud to have you as our rep in our constituency. Our support and prayers for you. Keep doing what you're doing as a lawmaker.
Viva, I'd just like to extend my deepest gratitude to Professor Dr. Dorisami, who spoke to me the other day and told me about this awesome platform and campaign that he's a part of, this movement that he's a part of, and for his invitation for me to be given this platform today. And to you and to the team of WHD, I extend my deepest gratitude for all the awesome work that you are doing to not just highlight stories, but also highlight messages of love, of hope, of faith, of peace, understanding, and you know, how do I say this? Togetherness, in this time. So thank you to Professor Dr. Dorisami. I truly appreciate this. Thank you for giving me this platform.
Thank you also for being our honorable guest today. So World Humanitarian Drive has a World Moral Day initiative to emphasize the significant need to practice morality in the minds of every individual in this world. So by connecting leaders and UN envoys of various countries to extend the support in favor of making a petition for the UN to declare the 2nd of September, that's the World War II, the end of World War II, as World Moral Day. How important is this initiative in these times?
I think it is extremely timely to speak about this. And I don't think many people know about this, about World Moral Day. And I have been given the opportunity to read up about this. And I'm impressed with what World Moral Day stands for. And I support the campaign. And I hope many lawmakers out there and people, those who are in government, those who are in NGOs, CSOs, NGIs, would come forward and give their support to this movement. Now let's remember that that we are facing a time where, with globalization, with the industrial revolution, information can be used and misused at your fingertips. And what we need is a greater responsibility on how this information is used. And I think the future is with the younger generation. It is to instill moral values into them. It's to instill values of integrity, of responsibility, of respect, of kindness, of hope, of inspiration, and peace. They would be the ambassadors of all these traits and many other traits that I have mentioned. And if we don't speak about this today, and if we don't move this campaign today, then I fear that we would face a generation that lacks not just moral values, but everything and all things and everything that encompasses what moral values are. There could be various opinions on what moral values are to me that could differ from you. But let's not forget that there are universal moral values. And these are things that I believe everyone adheres to. I believe that many religions also hold on to these moral values, universal moral values. And I think that the way forward would be to ensure that these universal moral values are there for us to talk about at our dinner tables, for us to talk about in our WhatsApp groups, for us to talk about at international platforms, for us to talk about even at United Nations. It should be something that is easy to speak about at every level of society because it affects all of us. So you have my support for the World Moral Day.
Thank you so much, Honorable Patu. So for our final question, this is our favorite question, like asking our guests, what is your inspiring message to the world?
Oh, um, I I think a lot of what we do, we forget that there are just fundamental basic values that we have learned when we were children, which is to love one another, which is to forgive, and which is to be kind. And I think that we need to have more kindness in the world. We need to have more kindness now, particularly in a time of a pandemic. It is known fact that more governments at a time of a pandemic and a crisis like this are building up walls. I would like to see governments build bridges instead of building walls. I would like to see lawmakers be bridges instead of being walls. And I think with all of us in this together, we need every single one of us to be a part of this campaign, to be a part of this momentum, to be a part of this movement of restoring democracy, of restoring justice, restoring freedom, equality, and universal values like morality as well. To young people out there who, again, see yourselves or have an interest in politics, I think this is it. If your heart is already there, then there's a calling for you. And I think that you should not brush that aside. The world needs people who hold on to principles and values. The world needs good young men and women to be the future of our nations. The world needs good people who honor the values of integrity, of principles, of responsibility, of good governance in the world. And I think that if you believe in those tenets, if you believe in those principles, then you are the people that we need for our nation and for the world. So keep up the good work wherever you are, and connect. Pick a mentor. Find someone that you look up to, connect with the person, and I think you're all set to be the future generation of not just Malaysia but of the world.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kasturi Pato, for gracing us with your presence, sharing your words of wisdom, expertise, and inspiring the world with your story. In honor of international recognition for your virtue and persistently serving and inspiring humanity with your noble deeds, World Humanitarian Drive would like to award you with Inspiring Humanitarian Award, signed by Dr. Abdul Basit Saeed, founder chairman of WHD, and Right Honorable Chris Phillip, awarded today. So
Oh,
congratulations.
it's an
And
honor, really. Thank you.
thank you so much, Honorable Katsuri Pato, for all your humanitarian works. And here's to many more. Thank you, Terima Kasi, for joining us here today. Honorable Katsuri Pato, Minister of Parliament, Malaysia.
Thank you.
Tomorrow is Amelia Earhart Day. In memory of her birth, we would like to share a quotation by author and American aviation pioneer Amelia Earhart. No kind action ever stops with itself. One kind action leads to another. Good example is followed. A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees.
That's nice. That's
Yes.
inspiring, really. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and
Hello.
inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion with Honorable Katsuri Patto, that it motivated you to speak out for causes you believe in and at the same time to stand for your principles and values. Here on Inspiring Millions Show, we present you with brilliant people from around the world, so feel free to connect with them on social media, and together, let's make a difference in the world. If today's discussion inspired you, please like it, share it, send us a comment, click the bell so you'll receive notifications from us. Also, do share with us your takeaways from today. Follow us on our social media accounts. Click subscribe on our YouTube channel, WHD Media. Visit our WHD website, www.whd.org.uk, for more inspiring events. Stay safe and healthy. These are challenging times for everyone. Please remember to be kind to yourself and others. To our frontliners, we salute you. We thank you for your hard work, sacrifices, and dedication to humanity. Eid al-Adha Mubarak to our Muslim family and friends. Happy to be out day to our Jewish family and friends. To all those celebrating their birthdays and special milestones this week, happy celebrations. Happy cousins, aunties, and parents' day this weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. On behalf of WHD team, especially those working behind the scenes, WHD Chairman Dr. Abdul Basit Saeed, WHD Director of Global Operations Ms. Sarah Wilson, WHD's 12 Honorable Secretary Generals, we thank you, our virtual audience from around the world, for joining us and supporting our show. This has been World Humanitarian Drive's Inspiring Millions Show. I am Vivandrada O'Flynn. Please join us again next Friday. We will have a discussion with Adam Fotheringham, actor, director, personal, and leadership coach in the United Kingdom, as we inspire the world here on Inspiring Millions Show.